February. I can't remember the exact day, but it was very early on. I was talking to a dear friend of mine from many years, Bill Kraft. And Bill was telling me that he had a sister-in-law that was struggling. And we happened to have her husband on tonight, DJ. And DJ is going to tell us her story. And it's a pretty amazing story. And I really want to salute DJ and congratulate him for stepping up and sharing this story, because I think it will inspire many people. DJ, if you can unmute, please do so. Are you there?
There I am.
Awesome. Thank you, DJ. I really, really appreciate you being here and sharing your story with us. It's one of great impact, and I really, really appreciate hearing it. And I just heard it for myself just a few days ago.
Okay, so our ordeal started here in December. We had quite a winter. Briefly, my wife had cancer 6 years ago and went through the normal process of cutting, burning, and poisoning, and she survived it. And 5 years later, she's cancer-free. So they felt success. Well, a year later, which was last year, something went wrong, and she started having this cough that wouldn't go away. December 5th, we went into the emergency room because she was in so much pain. And they tested her and they said, your right lung cavity is full of fluid. And that is 99% sure that that's cancer. So they said, your breast cancer has come back and it's in your lung cavity. So that's not the news you wanted to hear. And so, but we went home and we immediately began to pray. We said, Lord, if you want this healed, then you guide us and you show us what to do. So, as you know, if you're diagnosed with cancer, it takes them 2 months to ever do anything. So in the process, she kept having this pressure in her chest from all this fluid. So they started draining it out the back. They would puncture the back through the ribs and they would drain out a liter or more, up to 1.5 liters at a time. But they had to stop there because you get air pockets in there and then it's really bad and they have to do surgery. And so they won't take out too much. But when they'd get 1 liter or more out, it was still 2 liters left inside. It didn't relieve the pain. And so she was in this terrible pain, and the cancer, when they eventually did a PET scan, was metastasized onto the bones, to the ribs and the backbone. And if you know anything about cancer, that's one of the most painful things you can get, is bone cancer. So she's in this terrible pain, and they're not really doing anything. And we keep draining this 8 times. She had her chest drained. And again, in terrible pain. So finally we get an appointment to go to the oncologist, and he wants to start her on chemo, of course. Now he says, we can't heal it, but we can extend your life and you can live for a few years. But we've seen that happen. We've seen people be miserable and have more life, but be miserable. And so we talked about, we didn't know if we really wanted to do that. So we prayed about it. We went into the meeting where they were going to describe what they're going to do and the side effects and so forth. So we're in the room with an assistant who's telling us all this. And after they go through it all, it's like we took this and we says, we're not going to do that. We're just not going to do that. And to our shock, the assistant said, well, the door's closed and I'm going to not say this, but I'm saying it. I wouldn't do it either. Well, that was the answer we're looking for. So he says, okay, Lord, we aren't going to do that. We don't know what we're going to do, but that's not it. So we went home. And again, she's been in pain this whole time, incredible pain. And she's taking oxycodone. They gave her a prescription, lifetime prescription for unlimited amounts of oxycodone. So you know what they expected. So we go home and we say, well, now what are we going to do? Well, amazingly, within the hour, Cousin Bill called. And he said, you know, I was not going to get into any more of these multi-level things like this, but I got this call from Jerry, and this is special, because you should listen to this. So he sent us a video, and we watched a video of Kristen and explaining what had happened, how this started. And immediately we looked at each other and said, this is what we're supposed to do. So we ordered the mushrooms, started taking them, and And in 5 days, she was starting to feel better. And we said, maybe this is going to work. And then she turned around and started feeling worse. Well, what had happened was, because of all the fluid, they'd installed a chest drain. And it was supposed to drain the fluid out so she didn't build up pressure. And then they drained all the fluid out and relieved the pressure, which helped. But she still had this tremendous pain all the time, taking oxy and just couldn't get over it. And then she started downhill. Well, what had happened was the hospital had caused an infection into her chest cavity. So now it wasn't just cancer, it was a massive infection. So we went back in the hospital and she stayed there for almost a month while they're treating this infection. But during that time, I kept bringing the mushrooms to her and she kept taking, because this is what we're supposed to do. Well, she'd been in there almost a month, and right at the end, this started December 5th. This was the 1st of March. And she'd been taking the mushrooms and one day she says, I don't have any pain. And I don't need that oxycodone. And they'd come in every 6 hours. What's your pain level? Well, I don't have any pain. And okay, well, we won't give you any. So that was great. And so we went home and they put this drain, a different drain in, and it was still draining her chest fluid. And it kept coming and coming. And then little by little, I'll make it short. It's a long story, but the fluid started slowing down. We get less and less and less of it until finally there wasn't any drainage from the cancer. And if you know anything about cancer, if you have cancer internally, the weeping, the fluid is just unending. And everybody experiences that. Well, the fluid stopped, the pain stopped. What's happened? Well, you got one conclusion. The cancer's gone. But they couldn't say that. We asked them, well, why is this happening? They wouldn't say. Well, we don't really know. So long and the short of it is, we went last week into the oncologist. And we walked in, and first thing he says, we'd been with him a couple months earlier, and we told him we weren't going to do this treatment. He says, well, good luck. He says, I'll support you any way I can. But you could read it in his voice and his attitude, like, okay, you're going to go home and you're going to be in pain and you're going to die. So we come back in, and first thing he says, well, you're doing better than I expected. Well, that's good. Well, you have any pain? No. Well, what do you think's happening? Well, I don't know. It says, can you do a PET scan to definitively determine what's happening with the cancer? And he hemmed and hawed, and he says, well, are you going to change your treatment? I said, no. He says, well, then it would just be out of curiosity, so there's no need to do that. Now, that shocked me. If I were a doctor and I saw this happen, I would be curious. But he said, no, we won't do that. So we don't have a definitive test because he wouldn't do it. But there's no pain, there's no fluid. Then we went to another doctor who was dealing with the infection. It was another type of doctor. And we went in to talk to her. And same thing. And I asked her, well, what do you conclude? I said, there's no pain and there's no fluid. What would you? Well, she had a lot of treatments. She had a lot of this. Hemmed and hawed, couldn't say it. And so my conclusion, my observation is, they don't want to admit that there's something other than what they do that actually helps. So today, she's not in pain. She doesn't have cancer fluid. Now she has an infection that the hospital gave her when they did this tube that is still active. So we have an infection in the chest called empyema. Okay. And we're dealing with that, but the cancer's gone. And we're just praising God and living our life. And the oncologist said, well, he says, you're looking good. He says, just keep doing what you're doing and live your life.
Wow. Well, DJ, thank you for that story. That's amazing. It's very disappointing that they don't want to validate it.
No.
You'd think, it's just, I guess it just flies so far in the face of their belief that they don't want to go there. Wow. Well, thank you for that story. A lot of people will give them heart that are dealing with these kind of situations. So thank you, DJ. God bless you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Continued good success and good health.